Today's guest is Dagmar Kusiak, who is a relationship coach who helps highly driven professionals transform their relationships and self-worth, specializing in attachment issues, confidence building, and creating fulfilling relationships. So, Dagmar, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Drasco. I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to this podcast and working with you.
Awesome. Well, listen, this will either be a complete disaster or be completely great. You'll get to judge all of that by
Love
the
it.
end of it. So,
That's okay. That's okay. Let's just let it flow the way it's supposed to flow, right? And
100%.
perfectly perfect, right? That's what we say. We're imperfectly perfect.
That's my style as well. So yes, I think we're gonna get on fine. And I know we've had some conversations prior to you coming on. I know you filled out a lot of my intake and assessment, and a lot of the stuff that was coming up for you through those was around, selling and self-worth and how that impacts what I was understanding, kind of like how you're asking for the sale, maybe the number of conversions that you actually close. And if you don't close them, kind of seems like you internalize a lot of that as like, okay, well, now there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need more credentials. Maybe like I'm not as good as I think I am, but I think I'm good enough. Then how should I charge? And it kind of goes into that whole thing. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I picked up from just like the stuff that you've submitted so far. So why don't you give us any context on, what's accurate from that we want to add to it, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. A lot of it comes from when I'm on the calls or on the sales calls. People are seem excited, and I internalize a lot, like, do I give away too much for free, especially when I bring up the price, and then I get the objections, and they start to go, well, I can you give me some examples, can you give me some more tools? And of course I can't, right? That's part of my service. And I'll go into the to your point, some of the internalizing that and a lot of that comes a lot of the that internalizing, it comes from my past. I know exactly. I can nick it in the butt and show you, I mean, tell you exactly where it comes from. And it's from my family. I grew up in an Eastern European family where it's probably pretty similar, I'd imagine, to Middle Eastern or Chinese or Indian or any of those, that the family wants you to be a high achiever, right? My parents wanted me to succeed in school, get the best grades, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be all that. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. And my value growing up, and I'm not saying to fault of my parents, this is how they were raised also, right? But they didn't know any better. They were just raising us the way they've been raised and taught in their culture, because I am from Poland. That's how we're taught, is that the value comes from a title. It comes from having those credentials. If you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you have all those degrees behind you. And that's where my head naturally goes when there's what you call a rejection, or an objection, and someone may be fighting, when in reality I know it's not about me, right? But you know how when we were talking earlier, you were talking about how things turn from thoughts there to feelings to beliefs. And that's where I go, right? The it goes from the thought of, oh, they're not interested. Okay, well, then I feel frustrated. I feel like there's some of the feelings of inadequacy comes, and then it comes to the belief, the core belief that maybe what I'm doing is not enough, right? Maybe I do need to do more, and I question myself. So yes, it's a pattern for sure.
Okay, perfect. So I would say the one thing you don't lack is awareness around what all of the things are, the origin of it, etc. It seems to me the issue is actually on, I understand all of it, I know all of it, but I can't actually normalize that into any tangible results. I can't be free from it in terms of how I show up. So before we even dive into any of that, what does the opposite look like for you? Like if you lost the ability to have all this self-criticism, what's left over? Like who are you without these limiting beliefs?
Well, I would be pretty awesome. I mean, I would come in very much more confident, right? Especially regardless if someone believes in what I'm doing or needs more nudge, or maybe they're not the right person. If I take that away and don't take it personally, I think that's what you're asking, right? Take away all that. I would show up for sure much more confident within myself. I would not be affected by the way that somebody's responding or reacting to and it's funny because I don't struggle with this in other areas, but with the business, because it's a baby and I've grown, you know what I mean? I started as an infant, right? It started as nothing and then it grew into an infant. I get attached. I get very attached to it and it becomes a personal criticism. So to answer your question, I would definitely show up a lot more. I think I would show up a lot more confident and my energy would shift.
Okay, got it. And when you say my energy would shift, like what does that mean for you specifically?
Well, it would people recognize, okay, people, even if there's people that maybe aren't self-aware, we all have energy transference, right? And people on the other end recognize it. And I think, I mean, I'm quite aware. I know I do this, but for instance, in my body, right? When I'm leaning in and I'm interested, but then if somebody's not interested, I do a back out or you know what I mean, like okay, and there's a wall there. Then there's a wall between them and me. It's no longer like, oh, she's really still in this and really still wants to talk to me. It's something I know I do. I'm conscious of it, but it's something I definitely need to work on. So I think that part of the energy and how I show up confidently, right, where I'm probably not looking down, or I'm making more eye contact, um, regardless of like how they feel. Right? I'm not taking in their energy. Does that make sense? Or taking in their feelings. Like if they're resisting, I'm not showing that. Okay, I'm resisting too, and we have a wall up. Instead,
Right.
I would be leaning in. I would still be like I am in the beginning of the call, enthusiastic, leaning in, making eye contact, smiling, all of that. I think the smiling starts to stop too when I hear all about somebody who's maybe not interested, or they may be interested, but they're just trying to get information.
So your state is determined by the responses you're interpreting of the person across from you.
Sometimes for my business it is,
Right.
and a lot of it comes in also depending on, and I know this is also awareness, right? How I come into the calls. Did I meditate before the call? Did I come in from another call and go straight to that call, right? Did I have any pause? That will also impact because I come into sometimes with high energy, sometimes high strung. Not a lot of times, but I think it does happen for sure. So yes, absolutely, it's definitely the state. I believe it starts there.
Okay. So the original question I asked you was to really
Yeah,
clarify the statement, my energy would shift. And
yeah.
where your brain went to was really a beautiful description of your awareness around how your energy basically moves in accordance to how you're perceiving the other person react. So
Mhm.
they're acting favorably, your energy is favorable. If they're acting like pulled away, now you get scared because it's like, oh man, I'm gonna like lose this, right?
Mhm.
So that is, I mean, that's basically a description of what you're observing your present to be.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really like your brain defaulted to explaining that, but it kind
Uh-huh.
of avoided the original question, which was like,
What was the
well,
question?
who like when you say my energy would shift, right? And it was in
Uh-huh.
the context of like, who would you be if you lost all of this self-doubt? So how would your energy be if it was the opposite of what you're currently experiencing?
Oh, how would my energy be? I mean, I look at it, for one, I think I'd show up a lot more confidently.
Okay. So I guess that's also part
Yeah.
of what I'm asking, right? Like, do you have
Okay.
clarity on what is your state of confidence? Do you actually know like what it is that you're aiming for? Or is it just like, I don't feel confident now, so the opposite is obviously confident? right?
That's a good question. I've never really, yeah, nobody's ever asked me that. I've never thought about that. Like, how would my, like, what does my confidence look like is what you're asking, right? What does it actually
Correct.
look like to be confident?
Correct. Because like if you're aiming for an undefined target, anything is a success. Like anything away from where I
Right.
currently am, but it's like that's not really like it's no wonder that you're gonna default to essentially a people pleasing behavior, which
Yeah,
is, well,
some
let
of it. Yeah.
me like because you even said like should I be
Yes.
excited? Should I not be excited? Am I too excited? Am I like prepared for coming into this? Oh man, how are they reacting? Are they gonna like you know what I mean? Like there's actually
Yeah.
no you
Okay.
in that, right? So
Yeah,
what
I
is
see
the
that.
you that's actually confident?
Well, one thing that I would see is if I was not people pleasing. I know that doesn't really answer your question fully, but if I was not people pleasing, I wasn't caring, like in the sense that taking that energy or taking what somebody thinks,
Mhm.
and I was just showing up. I mean, literally. I mean, I wouldn't change my energy, wouldn't change my focus. I would still be me.
Okay.
I don't know if that,
I think it's better,
yeah,
right? I
it's
think
better. Yeah,
it's clear, and I understand you've never
yeah,
like thought of this, so I understand why it's
yeah.
also it seems
No,
challenging,
it's a
right? But
really
that's
good
kind of
question.
the whole point of it, right? Like I
Yes.
understand, like you have such high awareness of what's happening right now,
Yeah.
which is great, but it's what I call having a higher resolution problem. So that's like if I ask you to draw a house, like if you
Hmm.
drew a box or like a
Yeah.
square with a triangle on top, chimney, two windows, door, that's a house. Like
Uh-huh.
a lot of people recognize that being a house.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you projected lines out and you made that 3D, then you started to shade it, you added colors, you added a yard, you added like a background, like it's still a house. It's a much more higher resolution house. It looks better. It's great. And it fundamentally it's still a house. So now how that relates to what we're talking about initially. This is very common with very high self-aware people. Obviously, coaches fall into this category often, which is we get so good at creating
Yeah.
higher resolution problems because it's like, I know this tool, I know this tool, I can view it from that angle, understand it from family of origin, understand like
Mhm.
that's all great. And it's still fundamentally like I am not confident. Like that's the original house,
Yeah.
right? But we
Mhm.
avoid really looking at, well, do I even have clarity on what is the opposite? Do I actually know who I am if I'm not people pleasing? Because that actually describes the state that you want to be in. But if it's very nebulous, it's going to be hard to actually move there. So even before I go on,
Yeah.
like what's landed?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm a visual, so the best way I can describe it, you're talking about the house kind of example, is the best times when I was confident, okay, when I was in myself, is when I was speaking, for instance, like either in Toastmasters or I was actually, when I was really little, I was in competitions for public speaking, all that. I would look at the audience, and regardless if they were like looking whatever on their phones, I don't know what they're doing, right? Or sleeping, or maybe they were, nodding off. I mean, for me, it was like still delivering with my passion, with my full energy. I didn't become impacted by that. You know what I mean? Like I was
Mhm.
like in my shell. And that's like the best way I can describe it is when I was like in front of the room and I didn't forget my words, I didn't stutter, right? I was like in my element. This is what I want to talk about. And then the people that were interested at the end would talk to me and others weren't, and that was okay. But I didn't change my speech around, you know what I mean? Or think, oh, they're looking away when I talk about this. Maybe I need to talk about that. I didn't change any of that. No narratives were changed. Nothing was changed. I kept it because this is what I want to deliver. And this is what I felt was important. That's the best way to describe how I felt in those moments. And that's how I want to feel in the moments when I'm like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the closest I can come up with and describe.
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah.
it's definitely a step in the right direction. And what
Yeah.
I'm hearing is like I just want to be
Yeah.
authentically me. Like whatever
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
me and my
Always.
expression in that moment, unfiltered is what I want to be. Right. So I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Um, the other question I would have for you then is
Yeah.
when you were giving those presentations, where you were in front of these crowds, what did you need from the crowd?
What did I need from the
Or
crowd?
did you need anything from the crowd, period?
That's a really good question. No, I didn't need anything. I mean, what I did is those that were looking, I would make eye contact because I wanted to make sure uh, I wanted to, I guess, you connect, right? There's a way to connect with the
Right,
audience,
which is
right?
just
Get
part
them
of
to,
being a good presenter, right?
which
Like
is
you're
a percent or
finding
something
ways
like that.
to connect
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
crowd.
But
So,
in terms of if they did or not, I didn't care. Like it
right.
literally, like it was
And sorry, and
just
I
me
know
and
I'm
my,
cutting you off, but it is just because that was kind of what I
yeah,
was getting at,
yeah, yeah,
right? You
yeah,
didn't need anything from the crowd.
yeah.
But you do need someone, like you do need something from the person in front of you. Because
Yeah.
whether they pay or not now begins to have all sorts
There
of
you
meaning,
go. Absolutely.
right?
That's the difference, right?
Yeah. So it's like you have a preview of
Mm-hmm.
who you could be without
Yep.
the inner need,
Yep.
but the parts of you, I think they're still rooted in your past. And it seems like a lot of it is, you know, my worth is related to my result. My result is related to how good I am, like all of those associations, right? Basically create a need. So I
Mm-hmm.
need from this person to actually validate me by giving me money, which is, the result. Like I'm good enough to coach, which means in terms of a coaching sales type of relationship, you're not actually present to how
Right.
you can solve their problem. You actually are there so that by proxy, they can make you feel okay. Which, yes, to your point before, that energetically, that's going to be very like standoffish or more standoffish than it needs to be. So before I continue, what lands for you there?
Yeah. Well, I think in the beginning, right? In the beginning, I come in there always with the intention that I'm going to help on my breakthrough calls, right? That's what I come in with. And they always are like, yes, that was super helpful, or they have aha moments, kind of like I'm having aha. I'm thinking my head is spinning as you're talking, right? With the so we're having aha moments, but where the aha moment or where that energy shifts exactly when it's like bringing up, not necessarily talking about the program. I'm like, that's fine, but yes, when it becomes a monetary value, when I bring up the price, that's when it's, yeah, always near the end of the call, but that's when I notice the shift.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's like one of the filters I always use in my coaching is you can't be triggered if you're not loaded,
Yeah.
right? So your trigger is I say the price that now brings up where I'm loaded, right?
Uh-huh.
Because that's essentially the yes or no to that is the yes or no to your own self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like in that moment, this is where I need them to
Mm-hmm.
validate me, even though that moment is actually about me holding space for them
Mm-hmm.
to determine, like, do you want to step up and
Right,
invest
right,
this,
exactly.
right?
No,
Like,
absolutely.
so yeah. Okay.
You're
So
right. It's
what's
about
coming up
them.
with all of that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because then, yes, it's about them and whether or not they want to do the work, right? And whether or not that's where their mind is. But yes, you're right. My mind is like, oh, no, they're not interested in the program when in essence, it's a lot of it is they're not ready or committed or whatever, the issues are.
Correct. So it's like
You're
in
right.
that moment, you're basically, it's like you're having to bust the objections of two people, like yourself for
Yes,
yourself and like the prospect, right? Which
exactly.
is an interesting spot to be in, right? So going back to kind of the original question that sparked all of this, right? With the whole my energy would shift. Well, okay, what does that actually mean for you? So one is okay, well, I'm being authentically me. So the me equivalent of when I'm presenting in the actual call. But I think
Hmm.
part of it is also detachment,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yep.
I can stay detached from whatever the outcome is. Okay. Um, the other one I also think is self-assuredness.
Mhm.
Because if And I mean, I know you're the relationship expert, but one of the things that like I always say if like something does come up with clients, it's like the ideal spot you want to be in relationship. It's like I want you, I don't need you.
Right.
Right? Like that
Right.
interaction is
Exactly.
always going to be better than if like, there's a codependency of like I need you to act
Right.
a particular way. Right. So that self-assuredness right now is not there because it's not, I want you to be a client and I know I can help you. So like, what do you want to do? It's, I need you to say yes so I can feel okay.
Mhm.
Right. So again, um, like what's landing with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely. I agree. I mean, I do because the detachment for sure lands with that because I need to. I see that in when I'm talking about price is I don't. Yeah, I tend to yes. There's a taking it personally, right? Taking it more personally because the opposite of detachment is really yes, you take things personally, right? So that's something I can see myself working on. And for sure, yes, you're right. It's self assurance. It comes back to the people pleasing we were talking about earlier, right? If I'm self assured, then yes, it doesn't matter what other people think, right? And the price has nothing to do with the worth of my product or what I'm offering and the worth of me. So yes,
Correct.
it absolutely. I can see that for sure.
Yeah. But I know you intellectually understand all of this. It's actually the
Yeah, 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 yeah.
emotional aspect of this that it doesn't feel safe in your body to actually believe that. Right. Like that's still
Right.
the parts that are remaining.
Yes, because the whole thing of doing the business, it's very different working in corporate America, okay? Very, very different world. But then coming to doing a business, and then I'm getting more comfortable with sales, and I don't like the word sales. I like the word relationship building, right? But getting more comfortable with building relationships with people that I've never met, and then it becomes my baby, and it's like I used to have this thing, and I'm better at it now. But like even things in the house or beautiful clothes, I'd have a hard time, when it came to spring and fall cleaning or summer, in the fall cleaning to get rid of clothes. I had a hard time like getting rid of clothes, because I was like, oh, this brings up memories, or I remember when I was shopping with so and so, right? And I'm able to do that now. But now it's like transferring into the business world. So I love how you're bringing this up because you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, I like that. It's yeah, something for sure that's coming up.
Good. Good. I'm glad that it's landing for you. So if you zoom out a little bit, okay,
Yeah.
how is this actually affecting your business?
Well, it's if I zoom out, it's definitely affecting my ability to will close deals that I probably could be closing, right? With the clients. So sales, I mean, it's definitely and I know that chart you gave, not the chart, but the spreadsheet. I was like, wow, I'm losing a lot of money. So it's affecting revenue, right? Because I'm losing clients this way and I'm losing revenue.
So if you, I mean, you don't have to share like obviously
Yeah,
specifics, but
no.
even just percentages, right? In terms of like I have no idea what your close rate is, et cetera. Like what improvement do you think you would see if you could just show up more detached, more confident, more self-assured?
I would say that my close rate would definitely increase by quite a bit. I mean, I mean, at least I would say probably at least like 50 probably percent, I imagine. I'm just guessing. I mean, it would be quite substantial percentage. I'm throwing that out uh, because there are times with the relationships where it feels close. It feels really close, but it's just getting over the hurdle, like with the money part.
Right. So like that's 50% more sales close, that's 50% more revenue. But then on the flip side, that's also 50% of your time spent
Yes.
better because it's like, every sales call doesn't go anywhere, every, the back and forth, the communication, like there's a lot of kind of hidden costs of that process. So
Absolutely.
it's a
And I'm
pretty
discerning.
significant
Absolutely.
chunk.
It is. It is. And also, I think with that, it's not just that, but I think it's also I'm discerning. I'm more discerning about who gets on the calls with me because before it was like, okay, that's awesome. I was just grateful and very excited that there are, people getting on the calls with me, right? I'm starting my business. Yay. But now I'm discerning more. And I think that also has cost me time and money too when I wasn't discerning. So
Yeah.
yes, I think both those things together would definitely help me out.
And I mean, I think that's just like I would clump that in kind of the objective skill portion
Yeah.
of
Yep.
this. Cause like,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean, initially you want the volume because you want the practice. Now that you've gotten the practice, it doesn't sound to me like what you're lacking is the actual skill set of the sales. And like, have you actually like taken any sort of sales courses or like you've invested in that? Is that, yeah?
Yeah, well, I've gotten from coaches, from actually coaches that do very well. They've taught me, and then also in my old or it was corporate, my corporate job. I was doing sales or working with sales, and I learned a lot through that process too. So it's a combination. Yes, there's some training, and then there's also working with business coaches that do it naturally, like they're natural relationship builders. And when someone's like, "Oh, that's too much," they don't go, "Oh my gosh, maybe I need to change something, or there's something wrong with me or the way I'm doing things." No, they're just like, "Okay, let's talk about it," and then and I do a little bit about that, but I'm sure my let's talk about it is is like, let's talk about it. What do you want? Why not? No, I don't do it that way, but you know what I mean. It's not as gentle and it's probably more abrupt.
And when you're saying it's more like the other coaches are more abrupt in terms of,
No, I'm more abrupt. I'd say they're more gentle when it comes to objections, or they're more like, okay, they look at it like we're just here on this call and I want to see what the objection is and I want to see what's going on. And from the beginning, middle, and end, they're remaining calm and they're like doing their same thing, the same person. And Dagmar has shifted. Yeah, something has happened. We have lost Dagmar. She has jumped off an airplane and she is somewhere in the air floating around.
got it. So that's the needy switch, right?
That's the
That's the,
switch.
yeah, that's
Yep,
the people
that's
pleasing
switch.
switch that kicks in.
That's
Got it. Okay.
still there.
So that makes sense. And I was asking those questions just because like it's like, no amount of inner work or mindset work can overcome a skill gap, right? I just wanted to confirm like if there's not a
Yeah,
skill gap, then it's like that 50% that you're talking about, like the 50% increase in close rate and all that. Okay, so then that purely the block to that is not skill, it's actually inner. It's
right.
the people pleasing, it's what does this mean? It's the old beliefs. So it's basically my
Mhm.
past sabotaging my present,
Yep. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that's
So
that's a true statement. That's a true statement. And it's interesting how the stuff shifts, like I said, because with like relationships, with other parts of my life, it's like, yes, I've worked on that, but now with the business, it's coming back up. You know what I
correct,
mean?
correct. And I always
Oh,
say, like if you want to do real personal development, it's like get into a conscious relationship, have a kid, or
yes.
start a business, right? Like
There you
that's like
go.
your kind of triple threat in terms of like real personal development. Why? Because
Yes.
going back to what I was telling you before, like you can't be triggered if you're not loaded. So those are all context dependent, meaning it's very
Yeah.
common that if you've dealt with, this neediness, the people pleasing, kind of the attachment portion of it in
Mhm.
relationships, and great, like
Yes.
clearly you've made a lot of strides there. And what your business requires. So like if I wanted to grow my business by
Yeah.
50%, realistically what you're saying right now is like if I change nothing about my business other than heal these parts now in the context of sales and business, I could literally see a 50% increase in my revenue without changing anything about like what I'm doing,
I
right?
mean, I think so. I'm
Yeah.
guessing, but I think so.
I mean, I'm going based off of your numbers. So like, yeah, if
Yeah,
they're
I am too.
not
I
off
am
the
too. It's
numbers,
a
right?
guess. It's a guess just because of what I'm seeing, right? It's a pattern. So it's a guess. It could be 30%, it could be 50%. But the point is it would change. It would definitely
Yeah.
change my revenue.
And the reason that I bring that up is so often like the clients that I work with come to me at the point where they're like overwhelmed and overworked, right? And I often look at that problem from the perspective like profit and time leaks. So what we'll oftentimes reveal is kind of a similar pattern to what you just brought up. It's like there is this business problem, but it's actually a me problem. And I'm
Mm,
trying to like work harder, get more sales call booked. If I could only put more people on my calendar and I could have more leads and I'm going to start running ads, I'm going to run this funnel and like all of the things which have their time in place. I'm not against any of those, right?
yeah.
And if you can recognize that actually what your business requires to be 50% bigger in terms of revenue is actually just an improvement in your ability to close sales. And if the biggest limiting factor for you closing sales is actually more detachment, more
Mhm.
self-assuredness, more confidence in how you show up to those, like you could save yourself a whole lot of money, time, frustration, fixing the right problem versus trying to like pour more into the bucket of your business, not realize that there's actually holes, right? So the reason why I always like to make these problems quote unquote real with some sort of attached number to them is it allows you to focus on the real problem, right? Which in this
Mhm.
instance is okay, if I need the prospect to be a particular way so I can feel okay, that's where I'm actually not being in
Mhm.
alignment with the business results that I want, right? Because that's not being the leader that I need to be to kind of get there. So anyway, I don't want to like throw too many things your way. Like what's landing from that? What is it?
Well, all of it. I mean, I see the roadblock. I really do. I can see that if I had, well, I mean, yes, you're right. I mean, I would show up differently. I would show up differently. I would lead differently. And actually, you're right. Another thing, I know this is not a segue or anything. We haven't talked about this, but one thing I'm nicking in the butt, but I've done is instead of focusing on, okay, this is an internal problem, right? Because I didn't even really see that. I mean, until we really spoke, right? I needed you to I just need to pause and look at the stuff. But what what has rung true for me, and you mentioned this, is like, okay, well, then it's natural, and this is an old pattern I sometimes get into, is going into distractions, right? Well, let me focus on my website. Let me focus on, I'm not saying the funnel, but like whatever social media or do something else, right? Or to your point, let me go out there and see how I can get more people to book calls with me. But really, like everything we know, it's like going out and dating all over again, right? It's like, hey, you know what? It's just not working out. So I'm going to go out and date again. And that's what I coach my clients on all the time because you just go out and date. Well, if you don't realize that you're emotionally unavailable, you have intimacy issues, you don't have confidence, right? You don't know what your needs are. You don't even know yourself at all. I mean, I'm just putting all this stuff out.
Mhm.
It's really you're going to get the same results, which is not healthy relationships. So now transferring that to me, that is what's happening in business, right? So it's been interesting. It's like dating all over again, right? It's like I'm going out and okay, I'm getting more people and people are signing up, but I haven't really looked at how I'm showing up.
Yeah. And that's a great parallel to it, right? Because I think what it opens up for you then is the possibility to essentially be in integrity with what your clients are going through, right? Like if
Yeah.
if I am someone who's going to show you the root reason of like why more like matches on Tinder is not going to lead you to fulfillment in this area, and it has to do with you, it's not a dating problem, it's like a you problem, right? You now get to have the same experience on the
Yeah.
business side of things, right? Which is really a beautiful gift to give yourself and your clients because when you're in integrity with that like that
Yes.
energy, like the integrity energy of it is very conducive to like multiplying, right? So I think it's a
Yes.
beautiful parallel to make. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Yes, it was just when you were talking it, I was realizing, yes, there is that parallel. And there's a book that I just read. It's called The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. And a lot of what you're talking about is like that. It's getting in all aspects of your life, getting in integrity with yourself, right? And you were just mentioning having a kid. I mean, I don't know how I don't have a kid, but getting married, having a kid, and then having a business, how that can bring up stuff. And but you want to be integrity with one, right? You want to show up in all three of those areas the same way.
Correct.
And that's the disconnect, right? So I show up in these areas, but then they're compartmentalized because now suddenly the business, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not showing up that way in my business.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that's also fixable. So it's not something you have to, be out of integrity with forever.
Yes.
Um, but in terms of just mapping out kind of where the biggest
Mhm.
roadblock is for you right now, does this feel clear for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
I would say it's pretty clear. I mean, detaching, right? Not the people pleasing and having more of that self awareness about how I show up. I think is pretty, I mean, yes, it's pretty clear on what areas I need to work on.
Awesome. And yeah, because I mean, as much as I wish I could solve all your problems in
Yeah.
one podcast session like this is not the
Yeah.
foray for it. But if it feels clear for you, if it feels like okay, I understand it better now, um, I'm cool to move this into a close
Yeah.
if
Let's
you are.
let's do
Yeah,
that.
perfect. So then, floor is yours to move us into a close. Let everybody know, where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, this was awesome. First of all, thank you, Dresco. This is awesome. I mean, I'm like I, I yeah, I don't have words really to talk about how grateful I am to be here. And honestly, this has been eye opening. Where to find me? Well, again, I'm Dagmar Kusiak, and I my business is called Insights Match. You can find me on www.insightsmatch.com, and I have a free relationship quiz on there. So if you want to see your attachment issues, your codependency issues in relation to your romantic relationships, you can do that. It's completely free, and then I go through kind of what Drasco is doing. It's not in a podcast format, but we do a breakthrough call to look at your challenges and see how they map into how you scored on that assessment.
Awesome. Well, as always, we'll include that in the show notes. But Dagmar, thank you very much for allowing yourself to be seen in this way. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.